That poem was deep. All right, up next, I know one of Ms. Morabito's favorite stories. Sometimes in the summer she goes and visits these brass, I think they're made out of brass, characters that are down in the Boston Common. Sometimes she even brings lunch and she goes and sits there and has lunch. She's like one of those crazy lunch ladies that hangs out in the park and feeds the ducks. But she says they just don't seem to eat the bread. Ms. Morabito. Let's hear it for the Make Way for Ducklings team.
Ducklings down at the Boston Common, but how many of you know or have seen them with their little brewing capes on? Little shirts? Yeah, this is the first time ever that we go on our field trip. We saw all the ducklings with brewing shirts on. It was really awesome.
And Ms. Morabito.
Ms. Morabito, have you seen those with little shirts? Yeah. So that was really a special occasion this year. Right, well, most of you know Make Way for Ducklings. I would say everybody here pretty much has been on our duckling trip when they were in first grade. Do you remember that? Especially for the old ones, way back when? Okay, well, here is our version. Here we go. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live. Mrs. Mallard was not going to raise her family anywhere. So they flew on and on until they were too tired to fly any further. They had reached Boston.
Look, there's a nice pond down there. Let's spend the night.
They had flown down into the public garden. The next morning, they noticed an enormous bird passing by.
Good morning.
The big bird did not answer. But the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water.
I like this place. Why don't we raise our ducklings right in this pond?
Mr. Mallard agreed. And just then, a boy flew by on his bike.
Look out, you'll get run over. This is no place to raise our babies. We need to look somewhere else.
They flew over Beacon Hill and around the State House, but there was no place there. Lewisburg Square had no water to swim in, so they flew on until they saw the Charles River.
This looks better. That island looks like a good fine place.
Yes, and it's close to the public gardens. That is the perfect place to hatch the ducklings.
One day they swam over to the park on the riverbank and met a policeman called Michael. He fed them peanuts every day. And finally, Mrs. Mallard laid 8 eggs, and soon after, the ducklings hatched.
We'll name them Jack, Pack, Black, Mac, Knack, Quack.
Mr. Mallard decided to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like.
I'll meet you next week in the public garden. Take care of the ducklings.
Don't you worry. I know all about bringing them children.
She taught them how to swim and dive and how to walk in a line and keep safe from bikes and scooters. Then, one morning, she said,
Come on, children.
all the ducklings followed Mrs. Mallard into the water. They swam to the opposite bank. They waded ashore and waddled along until they came to the highway. The sounds of the honking came from speeding cars. Suddenly, Officer Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. He stopped the traffic and let the ducklings cross the road.
Hello, headquarters. There is a family of ducks walking down the street. Send a car, quickly.
Mrs. Mallet had reached the corner bookshop and turned onto Charles Street. Many people stared at the ducks. This made Mrs. Mallet proud of her babies. When she arrived at Beacon Street, the policeman was there to stop the traffic and let the ducks cross the street right into the public garden. Who is this? As they reached the pond, Mr. Mallet was waiting.
Here is our new island to live on.
Yes. And you can swim after the storm goes and eat peanuts.
And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. The end.